I arrived at Camp Meridian on a cold, biting October morning. Actually, I didn't intend to draw attention, just to pick up some equipment for the weekend training session, a mountain survival course for young soldiers. I had done this many times before. 2 days of training, decent pay, and more importantly, it helped me feel like I was still a part of something, even if just a shadow on the sidelines. My name is Elias Ward, 40 years old, formerly a staff sergeant with the 415 Shadow Unit, a name that doesn't exist in any military records. I left the military 12 years ago. Now I'm a civilian contractor, specializing in high-altitude training. But truthfully, a part of me never left. It's still there, hidden beneath the worn shell of someone who once belonged. I stepped out of my old Tacoma, putting on a faded camouflage jacket, so old that the fabric at the sleeves was almost completely worn out. But I wasn't ashamed. That jacket had been with me through freezing nights, life and death encounters. And on its left shoulder, there was still a faint trace of a unit patch. Almost no one recognized it anymore. Just a faint blur, once the symbol of a name no one spoke of. I didn't pay much attention, but as I walked into the supply center, I heard soft laughter. 3 people, 3 young captains, were standing in the tactical gear section. They wore crisp uniforms, shiny name tags. I could guess they were the newly promoted type, fresh out of the academy, who thought they understood everything about the military. I lowered my head, silently handing my request form to the counter. As I was waiting to get my gear, someone's voice rang out from behind me. "Look at the old man with the surplus jacket. Probably bought it and aged it himself to look cooler." I stood still, didn't turn around. Another voice interjected. Probably a ghost soldier. Those, "I served in a place that doesn't exist" types, you know. They laughed. Another person, with a dismissive tone. "My dad always said, people who put on old uniforms to pretend they were soldiers are fakes. Real soldiers don't need to prove anything." I kept my hand on the counter, silent. A few other young soldiers in the warehouse also started to pay attention. Some turned away, some snuck glances. No one intervened. Because they were officers. I was a civilian. I wasn't unfamiliar with that kind of reaction. I'd encountered it in bars, at contractor conferences, in parking lots, places where people thought they knew you after just one glance. I silently pulled the authorization paper from my backpack. My handwriting was still neat, precise line by line. An old habit, impossible to break. Behind me a phone clicked. Recording. Someone was live streaming. I clearly heard a sentence. "This video is going to be super hot. How to spot a fake combat veteran in real life." I tightened my grip on the pen. Never had it been so clear to me that some battles involve no gunfire, no bloodshed, but still leave you standing alone. Like now. But I didn't know, in just a few minutes, everything would change. Someone walked in, with familiar footsteps, someone I never expected to meet again. A general, a man wearing 5 stars on his lapel. I heard the sliding door open behind me. Decisive footsteps, heavy with each beat. Unmistakable. In the military, you learn to recognize authority without seeing the ranks on their shoulders. And I knew, whoever had just walked in brought the silence of an entire room with them. The air around seemed to hold its breath. The young officers behind me, engrossed in their live stream, also started to notice. The comments still scrolled on the phone screen, but the laughter slowed. Then I heard his voice. "Ghost 6. 2 light words. But to me, they were as heavy as stones on my chest. I turned around. He stood there, tall, imposing, as if time couldn't fade the authority about him. His dress uniform was perfect to every crease, but his eyes, those eyes held something no rank could conceal. Pain. I recognized him immediately. General Alexander Hawthorne. I had never met him in person, but I knew that face. Every shadow operative had to memorize the faces of the highest-ranking officials, and he, was the father of the soldier I had pulled out of hell. I said nothing, but my hand tightened, trembling slightly. That name, Ghost 6. No one had called me that in over a decade. General Hawthorne approached, slowly, as if each step dragged along an old memory. He stopped in front of me, his eyes still fixed on the faint blur on the left shoulder of my jacket. Kandahar Valley. He whispered, the 15th of March, 2012. Operation Silent Angel. I took a deep breath. There was no such operation, sir, I replied mechanically, a phrase we were trained to know by heart. Neither confirm nor deny. Doesn't exist. But he nodded. I know. Because it wasn't recorded. Just as no one ever acknowledged my son almost died there. Just as no one ever confirmed that one person went against orders, crossed 12 miles of enemy territory, and dragged him out of that bloody mess. His voice choked. But I knew it was you. Around us, the entire supply warehouse was dead silent. The soldiers stopped what they were doing. Some stood at attention. Some looked down. I heard Captain Webb murmur behind me, "What the hell is going on?" But he, General Hawthorne, didn't even notice. I remember every detail he said. Every intercepted message, every fragmented account. They told me my son didn't deserve to survive, that no one was coming back, that his body must be among the casualties. He looked at me as if he still couldn't believe he was standing in front of someone who was once a legend. But he lived, and I know. One person did what no one dared to do. One person without orders, without support, without a map, only blood, fire, and a silent oath. I swallowed hard. In the warehouse, someone was stifling a sob. I clearly heard every gasp. He continued, louder this time for all to hear. The man you are live streaming to mock is the one who saved my son's life. The man wearing a patch whose meaning no one outside of a few high-ranking generals knows. Ghost 6, he repeated. Staff Sergeant Elias Ward. 415 Shadow Operations Group. A man for whom I have carried a medal in my pocket for 11 years. Just waiting for the day to meet again. I stood motionless. At that moment, I didn't know what made me tremble more. Being exposed in front of the crowd, or having someone finally confirm that I had once existed. I saw his hand tremble, not from age, but from emotions that had been suppressed for too long. The emotions of a father who had been told his son was missing in silence, and who was now standing before the person who had reversed that fate. You saved David, he said directly. You pulled him out of a burning wasteland in enemy territory, carried him across mountains, hills, forests, streams, while the entire area was a live firing range. I didn't answer. That story no longer belonged to me. He turned, this time looking directly at the 3 young officers behind me. Captain Webb was still holding his phone. The screen showed a chaotic stream of comments, viewers starting to understand what was happening. His face was pale. Captain Webb. General Hawthorne's voice cut like a cold wind. Turn off the live stream immediately. Hand your phone to my aide. This conversation is now top secret. Webb fumbled, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Sir? Yes, sir. But everyone saw. They saw a man who fought, sacrificed, survived. Being made a mockery of by you. He interrupted. They saw you, young officers, ridiculing a soldier who did things you are not qualified to imagine, let alone execute. He looked at the 3 of them, one by one. Morrison's face was bloodless. Torres stood frozen, hands clasped, eyes downcast, like a child caught stealing. You will report to my office at 1,400 hours. We will talk. About respect, about honor, and about what it means to be a commander. No one dared to reply. He turned back to me. His voice softened, almost hoarse. I have carried this with me for 11 years. From his inner jacket pocket, he pulled out a small, matte black box with no official markings. He opened it. Inside was a winged black star, its metallic sheen shifting with the light, a symbol unknown to anyone, not recorded in any metal documents. Shadow Star, he said. awarded only to those who completed top-secret missions with a fatality probability of over 70%. Fewer than 20 of these have ever existed. I looked at the badge. Said nothing. Elias, he said softly. His voice no longer that of a general, but of a father. You have been silent for over a decade. You don't need validation, no affirmation, but I do. I need to thank you. From the heart of a father who has nothing left to lose, except the memory that his son lives, thanks to someone like you. I shook my head, my voice hoarse. I didn't do it for recognition. He nodded gently, his eyes still on me. That's precisely why. You deserve it. Then he carefully pinned the badge to my chest, just below the faint mark of the 415-unit patch. The entire supply warehouse was in absolute silence. No one dared to breathe heavily. They were witnessing something greater than a medal, greater than a uniform, something that couldn't be recorded in a file. But everyone knew they had just seen real history. I bowed my head, not to say thank you, but to keep a little something for myself. Before everyone's eyes stripped away what I had buried for years, I stood there, looking at the shadow star just pinned to my chest. It gleamed against the faded fabric, right next to the worn patch, like a scar that had healed long ago but never disappeared. A part of me wanted to turn and leave. To leave this place, like every time before. No explanations, no confrontations, leaving nothing but my footsteps. But this time was different. I looked around the room. The eyes fixed on me were no longer contemptuous as when I entered. They were eyes of listening, of regret, of those who were witnessing for the first time something that went far beyond military textbooks and tactical lectures. I took a deep breath. Who do you think I am? I spoke, my voice not loud, but clear in the quiet, sealed room. Just because I no longer wear rank, because my jacket is faded, I wear wear. Because I don't introduce myself by my achievements, you automatically assume I'm a fabricator? No one answered, but they didn't need to say anything. Their confused eyes, bitten lips, and sweat on their temples were enough. I turned to Webb. His hand still clutched his phone, though no live stream was playing anymore. You live stream to teach people how to identify fake soldiers, I said, gently but sharply, like a knife. But what you recorded today could be the biggest lesson for yourself. Torres shrugged his shoulders. Morrison looked as if he was about to fall backward, his face ashen. I looked directly at all three. I don't blame you for not recognizing me. I was trained to be unrecognized. But I am disappointed, because instead of asking questions, you chose to mock. Instead of learning, you chose to live stream. Honor is not in a new uniform. It's not in a Ranger tab. It's not in a LinkedIn profile or a West Point diploma. It's in how you treat others, especially when you think you have the right to stand above them. I paused for a moment. My eyes swept over the young soldiers scattered around the warehouse, some privates, some sergeants, some just logistics personnel. But they were all listening as if I had just uttered something they had never considered. You are officers. People will look to you to learn. So today, what did you teach? No one answered. Next time, I said, if you see someone with a strange mark, an unusual demeanor, ask, learn, maintain curiosity and humility before rushing to judgment. Perhaps you are standing before someone who carries an entire battlefield behind them. I turned to General Hawthorne, nodding slightly. He said nothing, but his eyes said it all. Honor, I said to everyone, is not something someone gives you. It is something you must hold on to, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. I bowed to General Hawthorne once more, then turned and walked towards the reception counter. The young soldier behind the desk, Martinez, if I remember correctly from his name tag, held out a bag of equipment and a confirmation paper. Sir, your requested equipment has been approved and processed with priority, he said, standing so rigidly he almost trembled. Thank you for everything. I nodded. Thank you, Martinez. You did the right thing. I took the bag of gear, turned, and strode between the rows of shelves filled with ropes, carabiners, cold weather gear, and optical equipment. With every step I took, no one spoke, but I felt their eyes following me. No longer contempt, but respect. A respect that needed no speeches, no reports, just the truth standing silently among them. General Hawthorne walked beside me, saying nothing the entire way to the door. As we stepped out of the warehouse, the high desert sun shone brighter than I remembered. Wind blew through the pine trees, carrying the smell of diesel and cold earth. Specks of dust swirled around my old boots. The mountain training you're leading this weekend, he said as we stopped together in front of my truck. May I observe? I looked at him, a slight smirk on my face. Certainly, sir, but I teach quite strictly. No special privileges for five-star generals. For the first time all morning, he smiled. Fair enough, he said. I wouldn't expect anything less. From a ghost. He nodded goodbye, then turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment longer, watching him disappear behind the barracks, then opened the door and climbed into my old Tacoma. As I settled into the driver's seat, the midday sun shone on my chest where the shadow star quietly reflected the light, right next to the faded mark of my old unit patch. Two symbols, one almost gone, the other never officially recognized, lay side by side like two parts of a truth no one wanted to speak. I started the car. The engine rumbled softly, wheels rolling over the gravel. Ahead lay the mountains, the wind, the training ground, the next generation I would teach to survive, not just in battle but in silence. Behind me, the barracks continued, as if nothing had happened, but I knew for those who had stood in that room, heard that story, witnessed that everything was different. Captain Webb would spend the rest of his career trying to live up to the lesson he learned today. Torres would learn to ask instead of judge. Morrison would stop repeating his father's words and start living by his own experiences. And Martinez, the young soldier who said nothing but stood as straight as a marker, would tell this story to his grandchildren someday, about a man in an old jacket, wearing a medal no one knew, and teaching an entire military base what true honor was. The mountain wind blew through the open window. I pressed the gas. No need to look back. A ghost never needs to be seen.